Hi friends, coming back to you with another episode of the Pre-Ride Show presented by FSA. I get a chance here to spend a few minutes with the Adventure Stash himself, Payson McElveen. Payson, man, thanks for sitting down with us. How you feeling?
Good. Yeah, it's I can't believe we're back in Emporia. It feels like almost like a past lifetime when we were here year before last. So it's good to be back.
The vibe is high, right? Like we had a kickoff of the racing season a couple weeks ago, and all three events attended really well with top talent out there. Do you sense that there's a bit of everybody kind of looking at each other to see what the fitness level is like? And because we had a year off, and although there's been some training and little pockets together, but
of course. I mean, anytime there's unknowns, racers will try to glean information or try to make sense of what to expect going into an event, because naturally there's nerves and all that sort of thing. So, I know Ian and Josh and the rest of us were looking at the HICO results, and the folks at the HICO results were probably looking at the Rule of Three results. And so I think, of course there's a little bit of looking and, Strava spying and all that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, you just never know what's going to happen, and pretty typically you'll think you have some clues, and then what happens on the major race day is totally different.
Was the year off, let's call it, a chance for you to reboot and reset things? Busy man, he's got stuff coming and going all day. Was that year off a way, in a sense, to reboot? What did it allow you to do? What did that time away from racing allow you to focus on?
Well, for one, I did a lot of big rides just because that's what I'm enjoying. I made some films, went on some new adventures, rode more than I ever have. Just overall, like for a calendar year, rode more than I ever have. Moved houses, met my girlfriend and now life partner. So a lot of real life stuff happened, shall we say. And I'm just now in a different point in my life overall. I feel more settled, and like I just have I'm just in a good space. Of course there's lots of unknowns still, and you don't know exactly how much progress you actually made in training, because there weren't necessarily traditional exams, in the form of benchmarks in the form of races. So there are certainly unknowns, but I had, I can't complain about my pandemic year. It was obviously really, really rough for a lot of people, maybe even the majority of people. But for me personally, it was mostly a positive year.
Because you kind of toggle two different disciplines, you've been doing this privateer thing for a long time. What are some of the major lessons you've learned along the way with that, in terms of how you have to build the team that you have, whether it's sponsors, equipment, and the team that might assist you in your day-to-day racing and training activities? Yeah,
for sure. So originally, I ran a privateer program starting from 2014 or 2015 until about 2017, I think, just out of necessity. And then Orange Seal and Trek and a handful of the other sponsors that were part of my privateer program, really liked the success and the model of the program. And I won the Professional Marathon National Championships. I think the first year was 2017. And we kind of made the group decision, Orange Seal and I, that we would sort of legitimize the program a little bit more by making it an official team, almost like a factory style team. So I actually don't own or operate any aspects of the team at this point anymore. It's all owned and operated by Orange Seal, which is great for me in a lot of ways, because a lot of logistical stuff is not on my plate anymore. That said, I still have a lot of input, and I'm someone that likes to think about the sport in a little bit different way, whether it be some sort of cool project or non-competitive thing, or ideas about sponsorship, team structure, all that sort of thing. And fortunately, I still am given a lot of input on that. So in a way, I'm in a unique position where technically it's not a privateer program, but I have more say in the program than a typical rider might. So that's been really enjoyable. And it's sort of funny too, because I just follow my nose to an extent, so I don't know exactly where it's going, to be honest. But it's been a great journey, and I'm thankful for the support.
You've done a great job at it, and it speaks to, I think, your skill as an athlete, but also as a business person, to be able to keep it all together like that. Because you compete at the highest levels in those two different disciplines, is it tough to maintain the proper training schedule for each because they require different skills, they require a different engine, or is it basically the same and you can kind of just train and then tighten things up for a particular big event at either discipline?
Yeah. So I was doing a lot more cross-country stuff. And when I say cross-country stuff, I mean UCI, XCO, like the Olympics discipline, 90-minute effort, really technical, tiny laps. And I really had to let that go once I started bringing more gravel into my schedule. Because I think you can pretty well cross over between marathon and cross-country without too much difficulty. As a high-level cross-country racer, you just have to do lots of training volume anyway. But the difference is when you get into that 6, 7, 8, even longer hour range, and all of a sudden you are having to completely change how you tune the engine. So these days I'm doing a lot more longer rides, of course, and then just very long kind of steady state efforts rather than more traditional like VO2 or sprint style or even threshold style efforts in training, which would more specifically be geared towards like cross-country style racing. So
I'm sensing that you're a big data junkie. Is that a big part of what you do? And are you deeply analyzing all those efforts and those individual training blocks?
I think that's been, personally, that's been part of the success of my commitment to the sport. I love the process so much. And if I wasn't so invested in the day-to-day, I don't know that I'd be here today. Like I love training on a day-to-day standpoint, and part of my love for training on a day-to-day standpoint is the puzzle of it all. So the data, the training. I've had the same coach, Christian Williams, since I was 15.
Wow.
So 13 years now, 12 years now. And so, yeah, I love that process. And part of the fun has been, I was very grudging at first in regards to this gravel thing. I just sort of dipped a toe in 2018. Frankly, had a terrible experience here at Unbound with mechanical issues and everything else. And I was like, I want nothing to do with this. I guess this was late 2017. And in 2018, thanks to continued pressure from sponsors, I went to Mid-South and had a very positive experience there where I won the race. And, being a bit of a sucker, I was like, oh, actually gravel is sweet.
Amazing how that happens, right?
Amazing how that works. But in all seriousness, I really got an appreciation for the community, and gravel does offer something different from a cultural standpoint than mountain biking does.
Right.
And so it's been fun to straddle those two worlds, but it does very much provide a training challenge. Sometimes I'll look at or spend time training with Colin, and he very much is just hammering this one style of training. And there are periods of time in my year where I really have to tune up a bit more speed and try to have the bike handling skills and the speed necessary to contend like a 3-hour epic rides race. And that's a very different style effort than, a Belgian waffle ride or an Unbound or something like that. So throughout my year, I kind of go through these phases where I try to be good at different things. And that keeps it fresh. And also the bike handling background affords some opportunity at events like last weekend at Rule of 3 or even in an event like Unbound, where there might be an opportunity just to gain a few extra seconds when you're really starting to feel tired from a bike handling standpoint. And I enjoy that too, and sometimes get a kick out of, taking a creative line and watching a few of the folks with a road background get a little squirmy.
You mentioned your longtime coach. I know too that you had a mentor in Ned Overend when you were younger. What was that experience like? What was the things that you gleaned out of that still impact you today?
Yeah, I've had an incredible number of mentors that I'm really grateful for, and one of the main reasons that I moved to Durango, Colorado was for those opportunities. Not specifically like getting mentored by Ned, but just community support. And Durango, Colorado has, in my mind, some of, if not the best mountain bike riding from a in-town standpoint and just diversity of trail standpoint. And a lot of people know that, but what is less known is just how holistic and supportive the community is in totality. I mean, everyone has heard of, the big name racers that live there. There was a year where all 3 professional mountain bike national titles were held by those of us in Durango, and we all lived on the same street. I mean, 2 of us were roommates and the other one lived around the corner.
Stars and stripes all the way down the street, man.
Yeah, and I mean, you'll be on the group ride and I guess it was 2 years ago at this point, Quinn would show up in his rainbow jersey, and then you'd have, loads of current professional national champions, and it's such a hotbed. But the thing that I think goes lost sometimes or less appreciated is there is very little posturing or like weird like backstabbing or competitiveness. It's all very collective, and that means folks like Ned, folks like Travis Brown, I mean John Tomac lives right over the hill. It just, the list goes on, and they all know what it was like to be a young racer, and so they want to help contribute. And so I rode for Specialized for a year, and that year specifically, I mean, Ned was just incredibly supportive, absolute wealth of knowledge. These days, Travis Brown fulfills that role more for me, and I'm very appreciative for his mentorship. But yeah, it's just one of the things that makes Durango really special and unique that I appreciate.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the race itself coming up Saturday.
Yep.
We've had a bit of a European invasion. The Euros have found out about this, and now they're saying, forget this World Tour stuff. We're coming to the States.
Yeah.
Any expectations for Saturday? How are you going to feel when you hit the line and get ready to go Saturday morning?
Yeah, I think an event like this, it's funny because you look at a World Tour event. In some ways, the closest thing, I mean, I've never raced the World Tour, so I might get a slap on the wrist for this for folks that are in the World Tour, but from an outsider's perspective, the closest thing is maybe like Paris-Roubaix in terms of parkour style, pretty flat, kind of rolling, rough, very hard on the body overall, but mostly the reason I make that analogy is just unpredictable. Obviously at Paris-Roubaix, there are people that win the race who you'd expect to win the race, but it seems like at least 50% of the time we see a surprise too.
That's happened a lot in the last few years.
Exactly. And I think that's very likely to always be the case in Unbound. As everyone knows, mechanicals are a big issue. It's so long that, I mean, you get into 3 hours to go, 150 miles in or so, and it's just a realm that very few people have ever been. One thing that surprised me year before last in 2019 is how intense it is. And my feeling was that the event pretty well was just like an aggressive long race, and people just died when they died, and then you just death march in at your own pace. And so there isn't a whole lot of like, we're going to pace this and then throw haymakers in the last 20 miles. It very much is a survival contest. And for that reason, I'll be very curious to see how the folks who on paper are stronger. I don't think anyone will disagree with me when I say that, if you're actively racing the World Tour, you spent many years racing the World Tour, there is no possible environment to get fitter.
To replicate that,
to get stronger.
Yeah.
So on paper, I mean, I feel like if we ran this race 10 times, I think Quinn would probably win 6 of the times. Colin might win a couple of times. I have no idea. But on paper, I think there are, in my mind, some very clear folks that are strongest. But I have absolutely no idea how that will manifest on race day. I mean, we saw a year before last, the heat was just incredible. And the fact that Colin lives in Central Texas and was outside for hours and hours and hours all summer and spring in the humidity and heat and acclimating, he and I talked a lot about how much that was an advantage. So I think, and then we see someone like Ted or Pete. These are people who spent a lot of years in the World Tour and just have that depth. So that said, it's Unbound. And so we have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. Mechanicals, tactics, like it's a very unpredictable event. So I don't want to make any predictions. Personally, I love long rides. And I was looking back at my training coming into 2019, and I got pretty sick 2 weeks before and had very poor preparation. And that gave me a little bit of optimism for my own chances coming in, because I've done so many huge rides between then and now. And so I like to think that my depth is going to be a lot better. But then lo and behold, I got Giardia last week and have been on antibiotics for a week. So I have no idea. the rest may be great. It may help. It may be that come hour 8, I have that little bit of extra freshness and can hang in there a little bit more.
I was going to ask, have you recovered? You've been very open with that and on your social media. Are you feeling better? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I've got my last dose of antibiotics here at noon. I'm feeling...
You got some body work last night in Colin's trailer.
Body work in Colin's trailer. Not by Colin.
No, not by Colin, correct.
And I mean, look, sitting on the couch, going on a 2-hour ride, I feel 100%. How I'll feel at hour 7, no idea. But everyone is going through weird stuff. Like, I think this is one thing about racing that, and especially high-level racing, that people don't understand or forget, is that very infrequently do you have a perfect lead-in and then a perfect event. Everyone's always dealing with something.
Sure.
Could be a crash, could be a puncture, could be illness, could be a weird travel experience. So whatever. I mean,
and sometimes you have to let the race come back to you. If you're in one of those struggling moments and it starts to go away from you, you just got to know and be confident in your abilities and know that you can bring yourself back into the race.
I mean, one thing I've learned over the years is that not giving up almost always pays in bike racing. And I don't think that's truer for any event than Unbound. Like, you never know.
Yep.
So I'll be racing all the way through the line on Saturday, regardless of how I feel, just because it's the right thing to do. And just, this is one of the few events I get to do every year where literally just finishing feels like an accomplishment. So
I love that.
No idea what to expect. If anyone tells you they have an idea of what to expect, they're lying to you.
And I think that's the beauty of the sport, right?
For sure.
Real quick to wrap up, I know you're a big NBA guy.
Yeah.
We're in the heart of the NBA playoffs right now. Who's your favorite? What do you like?
Man, you know, I'm a fan of greatness, and so watching LeBron and AD on the Lakers is something I get a huge kick out of. It's a little rough to see him struggling so much this year with injury, but I'm fascinated by the whole Nets situation where they've basically, you know, cobbled together this really absurd, almost like Harlem Globetrotters team that's sort of like a Hail Mary, single-year Hail Mary. I think it's either going to explode catastrophically and they'll come up short, or they'll just absolutely destroy everyone in historic fashion. But I think kind of my sleeper pick is probably Milwaukee.
Okay.
I think they're just quietly going about business, and they have really good balance this year. And I think they're kind of due. You know, they've just sort of been lurking, lurking for a few years. And as Reggie Miller says, the Greek Freak is he's quite formidable.
He is. It's our second Reggie Miller reference here on the pre-ride show.
Reggie.
But man, thanks for sitting down with us, and wishing you the best of luck on Saturday. And I know, I personally admire you and respect a ton your approach. Podcast is going well. There's the question I wanted to ask you. Who would be your ideal guest on the podcast? If you could pick somebody and you knew they would say yes, who would that be?
I've got a few, but I think Greg Popovich would be up there.
Okay.
Coach of the San Antonio Spurs. Because like we just talked about, I'm a big basketball fan, but he's also a really fascinating mind from a social issues standpoint.
His leadership skills too are phenomenal.
I mean, he's sort of like a Bill Belichick that seems to care off the court also.
Well put, yeah.
I mean, like, Bill is not getting involved in politics.
He's got a little more personality than Belichick, who
he does
talk like this all the time.
Exactly. I just think Popovich is a fascinating character, and probably he sort of like disguises it by being a professional basketball coach. But I think he's probably one of the smartest people on the planet, and I would love to see, you know, what's behind the curtain at some point.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think that'd be fantastic. You get him, we'll all be tuning in.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Good, yeah.
Payson, thanks a lot. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Pre-Ride Show presented by FSA. Make sure to subscribe on the YouTube channel and click the little bell so you know to get notifications of all the other episodes we're going to be dropping over the course of the next couple days. Thanks for tuning in.